Okay, so I just wanted to make a little video showing off my fish tanks. Um, right here is a 20-gallon long, and it's got about 12 white clawed minnows in it. The gold variety, like gold carrot, number 8 or whatever they called them. This tank has been going for at least a year, maybe a little bit more. It started off as just some fluvial sand and gravel, and I eventually added some fluvial stratum on top, and you can see the mulm has just built up over the months and months. It's gone through a lot of different changes and evolutions, but this is what it looks like right now. I got a kind of carpet of dwarf Sagittaria, and this is the last remaining crypt that I have. I used to have 2 more over here, but they slowly died. I'm not sure why. This tank just hasn't done very well with crypts. If I had to say, it's probably because this fluvial, or it wasn't fluvial, I forget which brand it was. This sand that I bought it wasn't really sand. It was like a very dense gravel, very small grain gravel, and I never found that plants rooted very well with it. I think it kind of strangled the crypts out over time. But yeah, it's a pretty beautiful tank. It's always given me a kind of dark, mystical kind of vibe. I have lots of different lights that I can use for it, but this is my favorite light to use. It's actually just a little fluorescent plant grow light, Fairy Morse. And I found that those fluorescents have the best color scheme for showing off the greens and bright colors, and it kind of, you can't see it as well on camera, but it brings out a kind of yellow green to everything, and I quite like it. It looks really good with fish, and I found fluorescents cause more iridescence in the fish scales than do the LEDs. This also have a lot of cherry shrimp in here. This is where I throw all of my shrimp culls, the ones that I didn't want in my main shrimp tank. But they started out, I figured the white clawed minnows would eat them all, but they've started, the shrimp have outperformed them. So yeah, so this is I think I said it's a 20-gallon long, and I have a lot of floating plants in here. You can't really see them, but I have frog bit, and this is pearlweed, which used to be planted, but over time it has just kind of separated from the soil. It doesn't want to be planted, so I just let it float. And I put a, see, I do tanks a little different than what I've seen other people do. I take a lot of like leaf litter and pine cones, or actually, I shouldn't say that. I don't use pine cones. I use magnolia cones. The seed pods of magnolia trees, those do great. Not only because they have seeds in them, which I just figure are nutritious, but they break down very slowly. They release a lot of tannins, but they break down very slowly, and there's no sap. And so you'll see the fish and the shrimp and snails and things like that will kind of munch on them over time. But anyway, that's my 20-gallon long. Up here, I have a 10-gallon, and it is, right now it's just a shrimp tank. And you can see what I meant when I was talking about leaf litter and throwing things in my tanks. You know, these are magnolia leaves. And you can see right here is a magnolia seed pod that's been decomposing for months. I've read and seen a lot of people online that don't like to put things in their tanks, but I've found that it only adds benefit to the tank. And I see a healthy tank as something that has a full ecosystem to it. So, when you look in my tanks, you'll see there's all kinds of microscopic organisms, flying around in the water column, and you can watch the fish and the shrimp chase them down and eat them. And there's a full life cycle in my tanks. You're always seeing, deceased shrimp and deceased snails. I'm not afraid to just let it process itself. This tank, I just trimmed it. It spits out plants like crazy. This tank is actually a dirted tank. I tried to follow the Deanna Wallstad method as best as I could, but this was my first attempt at it. And so I have, I guess, about 1.5 to 2 inches of soil, which is, funny enough, it's Fox Farms ocean soil. People warn against using soils that have a lot of organic fertilizer in them, or fertilizers, period. And I would warn against artificial fertilizers, but as far as organics, this is a very hot soil, meaning it has tons of nutrients and nitrogen built into it from organic sources. Things like bat guano and all kinds of things. And I used that soil purposefully because I wanted to see if you could have a successful ecosystem with a hot soil. And so far, I've had no issues. This tank is going on again a year and 3 months or 4 months. And it looks great, it acts great. The soil is still pumping out lots of nutrients, and I feed this tank as heavily as I want. You can see there's algae all in it, but to me, as a shrimp tank, as an ecosystem, it does its purpose. So the algae is a benefit to it. And you can see over here, I have a Amazon sword. That sword has gone through 4 or 5 generations of just filling up the tank and then consuming itself and then regrowing. So it's just always in a constant state of change. And I use sponge filters for both of these tanks. And you can actually see, maybe not very well because there's no light on it, this tank actually just uses the sunlight from my window is what lights this tank. And this is pearlweed and an enormous ball of Java moss. And both of those came out of this tank. But yeah, I just wanted to show those off. Thought people might find them interesting. I'm about to set up a 40-gallon breeder and a 36-gallon bow front, and I'm hoping that'll give me a lot more options for fish and stock that I can keep. But for now, I've got these guys, and they're pretty interesting. And I will say, I've noticed other people might relate to this, but my passion for fish keeping comes and goes, and I found that the way I've set up these tanks, they're basically bulletproof. I can essentially abandon them for months, and they will self-sustain as long as you just feed a consistent amount of food every day. I've had no issues with water quality at all. So I'm not the type to clean my tanks very often. I change water, but only about 5 to 10% every month or so. So just, this is just another example of how you can keep fish that I think is a little bit more natural. And I think this is the style I'll continue with as I go on in the hobby, because I'm having a lot of success with it. But anyway,